Hello everyone, it's me Evan, and welcome back to the channel. So, today, we're looking at a brand new fighter jet. This is based on the MiG-23, as you can probably see by its general lines. It's got those big air intakes, and the air brakes. It's even got the little folding vertical stabilizer down there, which I'm a pretty big fan of. But really the real gem of this plane is in the cockpit here. You can see this plane is definitely meant to be flown from the cockpit. Number one, you've actually got pretty good visibility. There is a kind of an arch behind you for where the co-pilot sits, but you can actually see through one of their windows at least, which is nice. I might consider moving the seat forward, but that might interfere with the ejection. So if you can see here, you pop out. Yeah, you don't get very far from the plane, but alas, we can't really do much about that. Without adding a lot more blocks that I don't want to add. So in here in the cockpit, you can see we've got our rudder pedals are working, our pitch is working, and our roll is working. Those actuators are exposed, but I don't really care because otherwise it's just going to wig out and be weird. We've got, if I turn on this switch here, this switch is for instruments. You can see how when I flick that on, the sight turns on, the light for the sight anyway. All three of these dials turn on. This is your speed. The bottom one in red there, that is your Mach number, up to a very optimistic Mach 10. Speed goes to 1,000 kilometers an hour, and then altitude up to 1,000 kilometers up, or not 1,000 kilometers, 1,000 meters, sorry, so 1 kilometer in altitude. Mostly just because that you really are only going to be worrying about altitude when you're close to the ground. Because in this game, having an altitude advantage is not a serious thing, and you can always pretty visually gauge that. So, yeah. So if you wanted to play no HUD, you might want to increase this to like 10,000, but then your readouts get super slow because you've only got so much dial space. But anyway, we've got a artificial horizon there, and that little dial there is actually our wing sweep indicator. So if we look outside here, and I flick that switch, you can see our wing sweep there. The mechanism is pretty strong, and I've only had a couple of times when the wing would completely shear off in combat. So you don't usually have to worry about that being like a structural weakness. I mean, it's more likely it'll just explode, because that's just how jets are. But yeah, so full wing sweep back, more speed, less maneuverability. And you sweep that forward. And I usually do combat maneuvers with around 50% there, which is a pretty good amount of acceleration and speed, but then you also get the fairly decent maneuverability. Takeoff, of course, you probably want that all the way. We can do pretty short takeoffs too. So if you also the lever there. And see, you can actually see the throttle lever moving there. Let's canopy and gear. And you can see we're all tucked away now. And also when you activate that gear switch, the little vertical stabilizer down there folds down, which is pretty cool. And it folds back up, of course, when you turn off the gear so that you don't bump it on landing, which is something the real MiG-23 actually had. So that's pretty cool. I wanted to include that. You can see with our wing swept all the way out, we have very good roll maneuverability and some extremely sharp, you can do some crazy pitch maneuvers, but usually you don't want to do that because that bleeds a lot of energy. I haven't mentioned this so far, but this is a no-flap build, so you do have to play this a little bit differently from normal aircraft builds, including some of my older planes, just because that you don't have flaps providing you with a frankly unfair amount of energy retention for how much lift they can produce. So if you look here, let's sweep the wings forward a little bit. You of course have your regular burner, and then if you hold down W, that's your afterburner, which is a ton more thrust, but it consumes, as you can see, a lot more fuel. And then if we're in here, everything seems to check out. Now, one of the cool things that I have added, when you have this turned on, which is all your instruments in the cockpit, you can see our artificial horizons, of course, working as well, but you can see, look at the sight, watch the sight as I pull up. See that? It pushes in, and that's actually to help when you're doing a high turn rate fight. You want to know when your guns are actually on the enemy, not when you think they are. And so that actually might require pulling a little more lead than you're used to, because your bullets might fall behind. You can see here, this much more closely matches where things are actually going. So like if I pull max and then I fire, you can see it goes right on that dot pretty much for a good portion of it. Now I would recommend, if you are firing like long range at a static ground target, turning the system off, because it can throw off your aim against static ground targets a little bit. But it's really good in like a tight dogfight, so I definitely see that as being a major win. You've got two basically non-functional mirrors, and that's pretty much it for cockpit fixings. You've got air brakes, but nothing else super fancy. Like, I don't have any flaps or anything like that. Whereas, of course, the real MiG-23 could use its actual, its ailerons. It could use them as flaps. They would both go down, and then it would use air brakes on the top edge of the wing. I could add that, I'm sure, but it would be very difficult and probably not worth my time, to be honest, when this is perfectly sufficient for me, at least. So a large part of this is also constructed of aluminum, so she's quite durable, and just overall, she's a pretty good dogfighter. You do have to be, of course, careful about that energy retention. But, if you can cut circles, you can cut through at people's turning circle, and do all kinds of really interesting maneuvers with the amount of roll you have, and the fact that you can sweep your wings to have an instantly better turn rate, or put them, further back to Naruto run away from danger. So that's it. She doesn't land very well. You kind of have to be careful about that. But yeah, let's just land this and then end off our video here. I'll have a link to this in the description below, so pop gear, wing sweep all the way, and now air brake. You can see it with the wing swept forward and the air brake out. She slows down real fast. And the landing's not so bad, as long as you know what you're doing. And then you probably do want to turn off alt mode so that you don't steer with your ailerons, because that's not very effective. This thing does have front wheel steering, so that's good, and a taxi motor, so if you want a taxi, it's got a little electric motor you can use to taxi around the runway. Ooh, and it does that sometimes. That's not supposed to happen. I might increase the wheel well a little bit before I actually, like the distance between the back wheels before I send it out, because it does this a lot if you tip it over. So yeah, you guys all have a good time, and I will see you later.